Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi there. Welcome to Grief to Growth podcast. Your host is Brian Smith, spiritual seeker, best-selling author, grief survivor, and life coach. Brian believes that the worst tragedies of life provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Brian says he was planted, not buried, and he is here to help you grow where you've been planted by the difficulties in life. In each episode, Brian and his guests will share what has helped them to survive and thrive. It is his sincere hope this episode helps you today.
Hey, everybody. This is Brian Smith with Grief to Growth, and I'm back with an episode. Today, I've got a near-death experiencer with me. Her name is Karen Thomas. Karen had a near-death experience when she was 32 years old. She was living in Anchorage, Alaska. This was in 1982. She was a mother of a daughter who was at that time 9 years old and a son who was 6 years old. And I'm going to let Karen tell the story of her experience. And what I'm really interested to hear is Karen had what's called a veridical experience, which is an experience that can be verified by a third party of something that happened while she was outside of her body. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and introduce Karen Thomas.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Karen. I really appreciate you being here today, and I really looking forward to hearing about the experience that you had. I also know you had experience of loss earlier in your life. We want to talk about that as well, because a lot of people that are listening to my show have experienced loss and how that impacted your life. But maybe you could start off by telling us about your near-death experience.
Okay, certainly can. I was working as a physical therapist in the Level 1 Trauma Center in Anchorage, and I injured my back. It happened to be the second time I had gotten it injured, so there was suspicion that I might have to have a spinal fusion instead of a laminectomy like I had the first time. So I got in touch with people in upstate New York where I had lived, and I asked them to pray for me on the day of my surgery, and also was attending a church where I asked people and my coworkers, just a whole bunch of different people, to pray for me on that day. And I'm only mentioning that because it does play into my actual experience also. So anyway, my husband and my two small children came to the hospital with me. It was one of the first of the morning surgeries that day. And so they came and walked beside the stretcher as I was being wheeled down to the surgery unit. And then right before we went in there, they were sent to a waiting room to wait for me. And then I was wheeled in and past several other operating rooms because it was a fairly large operating suite, and into one specific operating room, and then moved over onto the operating table from the stretcher. And I remember them starting the anesthesia, through the drip. And that was the last thing I was aware of until suddenly I was aware of being in the upper corner of the operating room and up so close to the ceiling tiles that I was literally only like 2 or 3 inches from these ceiling tiles. And all of a sudden there was a lot of noise and ruckus that drew my attention. And as my attention turned back toward the actual operating room. It was just at the point where they were flipping my body from being on my stomach, because they'd been operating on my back, over to my body facing upward, because they had cut a major artery and my entire abdomen was filling with blood, and they were going to need to open it. And the doctor was swearing at the nurses. A nurse was rushing out the door, sent to get blood transfusion, and it was just a general ruckus. But what I was feeling was complete calm and almost unattached to my body. A funny thing is, we never realize that the only impression that we have of ourselves is what we see in a mirror or in a photograph.
Yeah.
But I was actually seeing my own body 3D, which was weird in itself, and struck by how white my face was and how I didn't think I looked like that. I guess is just the weirdest thing to say, but detached in any other way from it, not at all concerned. And the only concern I had was, my husband and children, they're in a waiting room. Somehow I've got to let them know I'm alive, I'm okay. I've got to get to them. So as soon as I started thinking that, I began to drift, and I literally floated through a wall instead of through the door I had come in, through a wall and into the hallway that I had been brought down on the stretcher. Mm-hmm. And so I started kind of retracing the way I had come in, and I floated past these other operating rooms and down to a double doorway that went to the operating suite, and out into another hallway and toward where I thought possibly this waiting room might be. And as I'm going along, floating along, all of a sudden there was a man who was rushing past open elevator doors, and a telepathic voice spoke to me and said, "Pay attention to this person." And as soon as they said that, my vision was able to be up very close so that I could see this person's eye color and their hair color, what they were wearing, exactly what they looked like, and also could hear his thoughts about how he needed to get into that operating area quickly. And another man who I hadn't noticed in the hallway, I could hear his thoughts all of a sudden. And his thoughts were, what does that guy think he's doing? He can't go into the operating room. He doesn't belong in there. And so I heard this interchange of thoughts and watched the guy I was supposed to pay attention to. And as he got up to the double doors, he stopped for a moment, and then the doors opened electronically, and he rushed on through and into the operating suite. And at that point in time, before I could think in terms of I've got to go find this waiting room, it was as though I wasn't moving by my own volition anymore, and my movement had been taken from outside of me. And I was, instead of going horizontally, I began lifting vertically, and I went up through the ceiling of the floor that I was on, past these heat vents and stuff, and up through into the next floor, and up through that, and up through the next floor, until I went out the ceiling of the hospital itself, and was out into the sky, and up. I got up about as high as about a small plane might fly. And in Anchorage, there are mountains right behind where the hospital was, and and so I was up at that level, and then I began moving horizontally again toward the city itself, the city of Anchorage, and moving really fast. And at this point, for some reason, it dawned on me, wait a minute, I should be feeling air rushing past. I should be feeling that it's colder outside than it was inside. All of these things, and I felt no sensations at all, just like I felt no resistance or sensations when I went through the wall and the ceilings in the hospital. So as I got over the Anchorage sits on a bay. And as I got to where I was going to be going out over the water, this dark cave-like opening opened up, and I was pulled inside, and it was very black all around me. But way in the distance was a tiny pinprick of light. Mm. And as I got into this cave-like area, the speed became even way, way faster than it had been up to that point. And as I'm going extremely fast, this pinprick of light is getting bigger and bigger and bigger until I burst out into the light itself. Mm. And once I burst into this light, it was, although I had felt calm before, I became totally filled with love and just the most peaceful sensation you can possibly imagine. Mm. Just totally surrounded and filled me. And I was puzzled by where I was. The environment was very dry and arid, and there was stony ground. Mm. And I remember there was no sun in the sky. It was just simply light was coming from everything. And again, a telepathic voice spoke to me, and this time said, "Follow me." And as I turned in the direction of the telepathic voice, there was a figure of a man who was climbing up a slope out of this area that I had come into, up a slope, and then over. And as soon as they said, "Follow me," I was directly behind him. And so I was examining him really closely. Mm-hmm. And he had almost black hair that was pulled back and tied with a piece of leather into like a ponytail type thing. And the clothing he was wearing was almost like a toga. It was like an off-white color. And it was like mid-thigh length. And on his feet, he had sandals with leather ties that crisscrossed up his calves. And as I'm following him, my first thought was, this isn't Jesus. Because I expected I was going to be, if I was dead, that I was going to be with Jesus. Yeah. And I knew this wasn't. But I also knew that he cared deeply about me, that I was there in his care. And so he went up over the top of this rise, and I was right behind him, and the scenery changed completely.
So I have to ask you, are you in your body at this time? Are you walking?
No. In fact, when I came out into the bright light and was looking at the environment, one of the first things I did was look down to look at the ground. And when I looked down to the ground, I had no legs or feet. It was as though it just wasn't there. I felt as though I was in the body that I had been in the past, or in a body, but I could not see any feet.
Curious. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, the environment was totally different. It was extremely lush and green grass, and there were flowers everywhere. And the flowers were all different colors than I had ever seen before. And each of the flowers was glowing from inside, giving off light from inside. And the trees in the distance, the leaves were glowing. Everything was lit from within. So I was taking this all in, and my guide, I called him, had gone on ahead and once again said to me, "Follow me." And when I got up and close to him once again, we were on the bank of a river. And this river was not big, like maybe 20 feet or so across, but glistening, clear, sparkling, gorgeous, almost like alive water. And on the opposite bank was my father, who had died when I was 7, and my brother, who was killed in a car accident, and aunts and uncles who had passed away. And there were 4 other beings who were there that I wasn't familiar, but I suddenly knew they were my 4 grandparents who had all died before I was born. Wow. And everyone was just like having this big reunion, homecoming, welcome, oh gosh, she's here, isn't it wonderful, and I wanted so much to be there on the other bank of this river with them. But my guide said, "No, we have to go somewhere else first." So I reluctantly followed him down the back, around a curve in the river and into an opening. And in this opening, there was an enormous, I would call it like a Greek temple type building. It had columns, huge columns in front. It was white, but almost like a pearlescent white. All of a huge amount of stairs going up to this big double door entryway into it. And there were spiritual beings who were there, who were standing at the foot of the stairs, going up the stairs, coming down the stairs. My guide went all the way up to the entryway and again said, "Follow me, we're going in here." And as we went inside, the interior was a huge library that was stories upon stories of books and scrolls and things as high up as you could see on either side, and a long area down through the middle with tables. And spiritual beings were at the tables and looking at books, and others were there with them. And my guide said, communicated to me telepathically, this is the Hall of Records. This is where the Book of Life is stored. And he said, but we're going further through. We're going through here to a different room. So we went down and back into the hallway and then entered into a much smaller room. And as we entered in there was like an oval area as though you were at a big meeting room. And several spiritual beings were already sitting and waiting around this oval area as we came in. And my guide communicated to me, we're going to review your life and what has happened up to now. And in the middle of this oval, there appeared like as though you could see down through it, like a glass bottom boat, but then also like a holographic screen that came up. And it started reviewing my entire life from the time I was born up until then. And I wasn't watching it as such. I was in it. I was reliving it. And I was able to feel everything I felt, but also feel everything that the person I was interacting with was feeling at the same time. So I reviewed my life. They communicated to me that I could stay if I chose, or I could return to my life. Mm-hmm. And they said, if you do return to your life, we want to show you some of the things that will happen and some of the things that may happen if you choose to go back. And so they showed me those things. And I got the impression that these were people or beings who had helped me plan my life before I was even born and what the major things were that I wanted to accomplish in it. I know something else happened after that, and I don't know what, because that's a blank area in my memory of my experience. And then I was in a totally separate room with my guide, and he said, I want to show you your husband and the children in the waiting room. So I was able to see, like looking through as though there were no ceiling and looking down into this room and seeing the doctor who had operated on me in the doorway, talking to my husband and my two children behind on a couch type of thing. And then he said, I also want to show you the prayers of the people who are praying for you. And off to the side, I could see what looked like musical notes. And each of these notes was attaching one onto another. And he said, every prayer has its own vibration. And that's why it was represented as musical notes. And so anyway, then I saw back into the waiting room, and I saw that my daughter was praying for me to live. And so her prayer was the last one. And at that point, all of my emotions returned to me, my human emotions, and my love for my children and my husband and my desire to be there in their life. And so I decided that I would go back to my life. And my guide said at that point, you will not remember anything we showed you of your future life, because then your free will would no longer be free will.
Wow.
And you won't remember that, but you will remember enough, and will show you for certain a validity of the fact that this actually happened. So you'll never have any doubt, because you tend to be an analytic person and you try to talk yourself out of things.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, then I woke up, and that's the next thing I remember is waking up in the recovery room and my husband and kids being there, and instantly remembering everything that had happened to me, and having that same feeling of unconditional love and peace, immense peace, that was not only in me, but like surrounding me, almost like a bubble of protection. And it stayed with me for weeks.
Wow.
As I was recovering over 12 days in the hospital, I can't remember which day it was, but a doctor came in to check in on me. And as soon as he walked in the door, I realized it was the man that I had been told to pay attention to in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was a doctor. He was the doctor who actually saved my life by doing the repair to the artery. Weeks later, after I was home, and I was, still in this state of peace, I had to go to have a whole row of staples taken out where they had opened up my entire abdomen. So I went to this doctor, and I made up my mind that I was going to ask him about what I had seen that day. So I told him I had had an out-of-body experience, and I told him that I saw him, and I saw him coming past this elevator doorway. I saw what he had on. I described it to him. And, his response was, how could you know that? He said, I was in my office that day seeing patients, and I got paged to come to the OR stat to try to, save a patient that had bled out. And he said, that's why I was dressed like I was, because I had come from my office.
Yeah.
And so that was my veridical experience.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. So how did the doctor react to that?
He just, he was a really kind person.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, all he said was, how could you know that? And then I believe he said something about, you were in this operating room in a totally different area. There's no way you could have seen me coming. Plus you were still under anesthesia and all of that. So he said, I don't know how you know that or how you could know that, but, he said, I that is what happened, and I can't explain it. It's basically all that he said. And 30 some years later, after I got connected with ions, and I had a friend at that time who was a vascular surgeon, and he said, I bet he would remember you. Why don't you try to find out if you can find him? And so I went online, and come to find out he was still operating, still in Anchorage. And I contacted him via email and said, not sure if you remember me. This is when it happened. This is what you did, how. And he emailed back to me, and we emailed back and forth several times. And he said, oh, yes, I definitely remember you. And I've taught a lot of other surgeons since then what I did that saved you. And they've been able to, save other people too. And I asked if he remembered my sharing about my near-death experience, and he said, yes, I do. And he said, I've had other patients since then that have shared that they had experiences, but none that were as detailed as yours.
Yeah. Your experience is very detailed and has a lot of the classic elements we talk about, the tunnel, the light, the life review. I want to ask you. You mentioned you felt really peaceful and loved this whole time. You looked across and you saw your family on the other bank, and you went to go to them. But you mentioned after you started feeling the prayers and you felt your daughter's prayer, you said your human emotions returned to you. So up until that point, do you think you would have stayed if you had been given the choice? It sounds. How did that affect you?
Yes, I do think I probably would have stayed.
Yeah.
Because although it's hard to explain the difference in what my emotion was, I was feeling the joy and the love of my family seeing me and being glad that I was there with them. Those emotions I was feeling, but somehow I was divorced from the feelings of my life as I had been living it up to that point. Yeah. I could observe it more, but I wasn't in pain about it. I wasn't feeling emotionally distressed about it. And I don't know how to explain that.
No, I think it's very common, Karen. I mean, I talk to a lot of people that have near-death experiences, and I think it's something that's hard for us that are still in the body to understand. Yeah. Is that almost sense of detachment, which sounds like a cold word, but when you look back at your body and even looking at your life, and I work with a lot of parents who have lost children, and I've heard people say, well, I know that she would have chosen to come back to me if she'd been given a choice, and I've had the same thought about my daughter, but there's something about, I think when we're over there, when we cross over, we just have a different perspective. Is that what would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And there is a certain amount of, I guess you could say, destiny based on what you had planned for your life and what you had accomplished or hadn't yet accomplished that comes into play too. Because I lost my father when I was 7.
Yeah.
I was able to feel more of what that impact would have been on my own kids.
Right.
Because they were almost the exact same ages, one older and one a little bit younger. And once I was able to tune into that and also feel strongly that I would have a positive difference in their lives if I returned, and they would have been fine if I didn't. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of hard to put this into words because, like in thinking back over it, I missed my father so much when he died, but there were many things that took place in my life after he wasn't in my life that never would have happened in the way they did if he had still lived.
We'll get back to Grief to Growth in just a few seconds. Did you know that Brian is an author and a life coach? If you're grieving or know someone who is grieving, his book, Grief to Growth, is a best-selling, easy-to-read book that might help you or someone you know. People work with Brian as a life coach to break through barriers and live their best lives. You can find out more about Brian and what he offers at www.grieftogrowth.com, www.grief2growth.com, or text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/grief2growth, www.patreon.com/GRIEF2GROWTH to make a financial contribution. And now, back to Grief to Growth.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month or, of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode. Right.
And they were good things. In many cases, they were positive things. They were things that I just never would have done. So I felt as though it was his destiny to leave me at the time that he did. And it was my destiny to return to my life with that knowledge and the knowledge of a life spent without a parent, to be able to communicate that to my kids. It's really hard to put into words. And also, I was there to support losses that ended up happening after I returned to my life. That as different ones happened, I would have like a deja vu type of a memory. Oh, this is one of those things that I was shown in my future, that now I realize, even though the memory was taken away from me, that now that this is actually happening, this is one of those things I was shown that if I didn't come back to my life, would have been totally different, wouldn't have happened in the same way. I had a relative who was very close to, almost like a sister, and her 20-year-old daughter died. And I was with her at the hospital when she lost her daughter. And I was with her for many months after that to talk to her about what it's like to pass on, to be with her at compassionate friends meetings, to help her get support from other parents who had been through that type of an experience. I was with my own sister. Within 2 years after coming back to my life, she died from breast cancer. And I was with her through that experience and through being able, again, to communicate to her what it is like in the afterlife. So lots of things.
Yeah. It's really interesting how it all works together, and I like the way you put it. It was your father's destiny to leave early.
Yeah.
And then you had the experience that you had, but it was your destiny to come back and having had that experience, and partially because your father left when you left early. So it's really hard for us when we lose someone, whether we're a young child losing a parent or a parent losing a young child, because for me it was the opposite, to say, what is the purpose of this? What is the point of this? When it first happens, it doesn't make any sense to us. But as time unfolds, then we can kind of see, what comes out of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it is important, at least for me, it's been important for an understanding to realize that we actually do have a role in planning our lives before we live them. Mm. And there are spiritual experiences that we want to encounter and that we want to grow spiritually because of having them and having what results from them. And yet so many people have a difficult time and say, there is no way I would choose this hard thing. I would choose everything to be good and to be happy and to be positive and never have to have this. But our spiritual growth is a totally different thing than our earthly life.
Yeah, I think that's a hard lesson for us to learn, because you're right. We say, why would I just plan a happy life? But if we think about it, if we just had a happy life when nothing bad ever happened, we would be spiritually infants. We would be, we would never build character. We'd never learn love. We'd never learn compassion. You have to have some loss, some lack where we can step in to learn those things. Right. And the compassion that you gained from your near-death experience, you wouldn't have been able to share if someone else if your sister hadn't gone through what she went through and your friend hadn't gone through losing your daughter. That gave you the opportunity to share that with them.
Right. Right. And that is one of the things that keeps coming back in my life. And I think probably with what you have started and what you're doing with your podcast, plus what you did with your book and stuff, you encounter people who end up coming to you, and they end up being people that you can communicate with and you can share with and really help in dealing with the circumstances that they face. And I find that a lot after my other radio interviews and with being associated with IONS and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have left my email address and several times, and people will come out of nowhere and email me, and I, am able to respond to them, sometimes talk to them on the phone and stuff. And it always amazes me how perfect their timing is to coming to me with what they come to me with. And then again, what I'm able to pass on to them. And so, yeah, it's quite an amazing thing.
So Karen, what do you think are the lessons that we can learn from your near-death experience?
Oh, first of all, that the most important thing is love, and expressing love to everyone that we possibly can in any circumstances that we possibly can, and to help people understand that the ultimate of where we will be is in immense love. So I think it's important to think about every situation that you face and basically say, okay, why is this happening to me now? What can I learn from it? How can I grow to be a better person? And how can I be able to help someone else more as a result of it, and express that love that I found when I was on the other side?
Yeah, I think that's great. I love the way you put that. I think that's excellent. I was talking with just someone earlier today, and she's kind of new to this stuff about soul plan and life reviews and all that stuff. And she said, I really am scared of my life review. So what would you say to someone that has a fear about that life review?
I would say that that when I experienced mine, the only, I guess you could say, negative feelings that I had came from within me. And those feelings were, gee, why didn't I do better there? I could have done better. I could have reacted in this way, and that would have been a better ripple effect going out through that person to everybody they encountered. Mm-hmm. But as far as judgment from God or from those spiritual beings who were there with me, absolutely not. It was completely, we're just looking at this. This is helping you. We love you so much, and we love what you did, and we love your courage in choosing this life. And, no judgment, no condemnation, no shame on you or anything of that to that effect.
Yeah, I love you saying that, and I want to emphasize that because I think because of some of our backgrounds, our upbringing, when we hear life review, we think judgment. Yeah. We think we're going to be condemned, we're going to be shamed, we're going to be told that we were sinners.
Oh no, absolutely not. In fact, that was my hardest reintegration back into my life, was that I had been very active with a church that was very much built on that type of foundation. Mm-hmm. And going into that atmosphere again, I say to people, it was like fingernails on a chalkboard. Whenever anything would be brought up about scripture saying condemnation and judgment, and never mind, hellfire and all of that stuff, but just even any sort of shame on you, judgment type of thing, it just grated against me so badly because I felt deep within me that it was wrong. It was not who God was, and it was not what my afterlife experience was. at all.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.growth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it. So I thought it was also interesting. You mentioned your guide, and when you said the long dark hair and the sandals and the toga, I'm thinking Jesus, and you're like, no, it wasn't Jesus. So why do you think you saw someone and it wasn't Jesus?
Well, since that time, I have done a lot more research into what happened, who might that possibly have been, because that really was something that was like a big thing I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began doing things like meditation. And in meditation, I began to learn about spiritual guides, or other people would call guardian angel. I suppose that the terminology varies from person to person. But anyway, within meditation, I was able to reconnect and learn that this person, this man who had been with me during my near-death experience, was my spiritual guide, and that he had always been there, though I didn't know it, and would always be there since. So
yeah, I think that's interesting too, because I've heard so many people that try to dismiss NDEs as hallucinations or wishful thinking. And they'll say, well, of course you saw Jesus because you expected to see Jesus. So when we find these things that aren't expected, I think that kind of pushes back against that at least a little bit. But you expect to see Jesus, but you saw, someone else.
Exactly. And I have heard the same sort of thing, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that near-death experiences are very much tailored to the individual person in terms of what they need to learn to go back before they go back to their life.
Right.
And so they are very different. But when someone tries to explain it away in terms of, well, yeah, if you're a Christian, then you're going to see Jesus. And if you're, a Muslim, then you're going to see Allah. And that it's all just completely your imagination, which, clearly it wasn't, because I couldn't have imagined my doctor who came in to save my life, who confirmed it to me that, in fact, what I saw actually happened.
Right.
And no, people do not always see what they anticipate that they should see.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely true. So when you came, after you had your experience and you came back, how long did it take you to start talking to people about it? This was in 1982. So this is a point where most people hadn't heard of the near-death experience.
Right. Again, because I was part of a church at the time that I came back, I would start to talk to people about it, and I would get a very negative response about, kind of, that's nice, dear. I'm sure that made you feel better, and that it was good that you could imagine that. And then it got into the people who would say, well, that was all just produced because your brain was losing oxygen because you had bled out, and all sorts of explanations that I knew were not right. And so that was difficult. And I was glad that my husband was with me when I went to the return appointment with the doctor and shared that with him and had him confirm what had happened.
Oh, that's good.
Because my husband, I think, was even very uncertain about what is this that she's coming up with here. This doesn't make any sense to me. But after he was there in the doctor's office, it was like, well, it definitely happened, didn't it? Now what do I do with it? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was difficult. And I reached a point where I just did not talk about it for a very long time.
I've got to ask you what your thoughts are on this. This is just your opinion, I guess, because I find it fascinating that so many religious people, and I'll say specifically Christians, push back against the near-death experience. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the church, and we were always taught to believe in heaven and God and Jesus and, afterlife, and we're eternal beings. But why do you think they push back against the near-death experience when you say, I was actually there?
I think it depends on what that religious setting is, how traditionalist or fundamentalist it is. Mm-hmm. Because I think what happens with folks who have that, they have been taught to believe exactly what the Bible says, mm-hmm. and not to vary from it, or else it isn't right or it isn't acceptable. And when it doesn't match up exactly to what they expect and have been taught to believe, then it can't be acceptable. It's got to be wrong in some way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why, but I'm not really certain.
Yeah, I like I said, I find it really interesting when I talk to people who've had these experiences and they're in the church, and I would think they'd say, people would say, yeah, great. This confirms the fact that we live on, that this person was in, and now we have an idea of what, maybe heaven was like. But no, they say, no, you must not have really experienced that. So I just find that to be, seems kind of contradictory to me. And I remember talking with a really good friend about, I interview people with near-death experiences all the time. And I said, I think Paul had near-death experiences, mm-hmm. Paul, the Bible, Paul talks about being in the third heaven, and he was praying and he had this experience. He talks about being on the road to Damascus. He sees a bright light, hears a voice, he's struck down, and he sees Jesus. I said, those to me sound like a lot like near-death experiences. My buddy goes, well, sure, I believe Paul had those. I said, I do too. But I also believe that the person I interviewed last week, when they told me that they had a similar experience, no, I can't believe that.
Yeah. And I think this is where judgmentalism weaves into things. Okay. Because like before this happened to me, I was very worried, particularly about my brother who was killed in a car accident, because he had an alcoholism problem. He hadn't attended church in forever. He would get into bar fights and things like that. And as far as I knew, he had, really did not have much of a spiritual life. And so my concern was, how can he be there? Well, he hasn't met this parameter and that litmus test and things that the Bible and the church says. Mm-hmm. And so it was such a pleasant and wonderful relief for me to see him there, with my dad and with other family members. And it was like, wait a minute, that cannot be right. This judgment about you have to cross this T and you must dot that I, and you have to pass all of these tests of righteousness or something, or else you won't be there. And it just simply wasn't the case. Wow. So I think that's why people do that.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that you said that, because I know there's still people that have that fear for themselves or for their loved ones. And I have a personal experience that an uncle who was murdered, actually. And I was taught by the church that because of certain circumstances in his life, that there's no way he's going to be there. And I just thought, that doesn't seem right to me, because that we're all good people inside. We all do the best that we can. And if God understands that, how could he do these things to people? So I find it very encouraging when someone like you can verify for us that these people that someone once told us could not possibly be there, that they are going to be there for us.
Right. And I think it's the difference between, yes, I know that God loves, but I don't understand that God loves unconditionally. That word unconditionally is so important and so hard for people to grasp, because so much of our lives here on earth is very conditional. And there is so much judgment that takes place. And so to even envision God being completely unconditionally loving is hard for people to wrap their head around sometimes, I think.
Yeah. So Karen, how did your life change after your near-death experience?
Well, it changed in a lot of ways. Initially, I say I tried to fit that square peg into a round hole in terms of trying to fit my experience into what my religious beliefs had been before I had the experience. And the more I tried, the more it didn't fit properly. I reached a point where I just knew for me, I had to step away from the church and to explore and to learn more. And that was difficult because my husband and his family have always been very closely tied to the church. And even though he knew what I had experienced was real, he had a very hard time with this person that was so different from the person he had married. We actually reached a point where we separated for 6 months. And according to IANS, they have said that most people who have a near-death experience who are married, I think it's around 78%, don't end up staying married because they are just such a different person after having their near-death experience. And we were lucky that we were able to work through counseling, and we were able to work through and find our way back to our essential selves and our love. Yeah. And in June, we will have been married 49 years.
Oh, wow. So, congratulations. Wow.
So that's a very good thing, but it was a difficult integrating period.
Yeah.
I did go through a lot of painful losses. I had the loss of my sister from breast cancer within 2 years after my near-death experience. And I had my dear relative's daughter who passed away. She had one of these fluky drug, alcohol, and Tylenol mismatches that caused her liver to be destroyed, and wasn't able to get a transplant in time. And that incident that I was able to be there for her, just so many things that have been challenges. And I actually nearly died a second time myself, but didn't have a near-death experience. Again, I had an incident of almost bleeding to death after a hip replacement surgery and losing the use of my leg for completely for about a year, and partially has returned. So lots of different challenges that made life difficult, but then also came to the point of finding out about other near-death experiencers, getting to relate to them, getting to find out how the things that I learned could be helpful to other people. Just lots of changes.
Yeah. Well, the thing about, I guess, when we have these experiences, they're so profound, but we come back to the world that we all live in, which is still full of challenges and ups and downs, but maybe a little bit different perspective on it, have the higher perspective you can look at it from.
Definitely a different perspective, I think.
Yeah.
It really helps.
So you touched on something, and we just talked about something, this integration when you come back. And I know you participated in a documentary called Back from the Light. I think it's something not a lot of people are maybe not aware of who haven't looked at near-death experiences in depth. This reintegration back into this world that we live in. And you mentioned the divorce rate, because when people come back, a lot of times they're literally different people. Their spouses don't recognize them. So
yeah.
What were some
exactly.
What were some of the things that were discussed in the documentary you participated in?
Well, there was that. there was also the difference in spirituality, and sometimes the new abilities of being able to have high levels of intuition and be able to relate to other people in ways that you don't expect. It's almost as though you can feel the emotion of the people that as you interact with them, you know what they're dealing with. And when you try to speak up, it can be very unwelcome from the person that you're relating to.
Yeah.
So these different internal things within you that are so different. I tended, before my near-death experience, I did tend to be much more judgmental of other people. I wanted the best for my kids, and so I was very hard on them. I was, nothing was good enough a lot of times, and so to come back and to learn how wrong that was and to begin to change within myself, it wasn't instantaneous. There was lots of that old self coming forward and then my new self fitting back in. It's a struggle in many different ways. A lot of people will say, oh gosh, those near-death experiences, those are wonderful. I want one of those. How come I can't have one of those? Well, you have no idea. I think you see the good part of what the experience is, but then you don't really realize how it changes you so much, and how many people that were in your life miss the old you and want the old you back.
Try to push you back into that.
Yeah. and how difficult it is to kind of bring that all back into your everyday life.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why when we come to this place, there's this forgetfulness that we have. And when you have the near-death experience, you're kind of waking up to the way things are supposed to be, or the way things could be, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine there's somewhat of a mourning of like, why doesn't everybody understand that we're all one, that it's all about unconditional love and stop sweating the small stuff.
One of the women in the documentary, and again, her experience was a long, long time ago, but I want to say like maybe in the 60s. And she was really kind of a very young person and was so excited about wanting to share her experience, and was a part of a Catholic church, and was recommended to speak to her priest and talk to her priest, and had the priest say, that's crazy talk. And if you don't stop that, I'm going to recommend that they send you to a mental hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That type of a harsh reaction, and how difficult it was for her to come from that point to being able to realize the validity of her experience and the harshness of how some people would view it as just simply being, you were crazy, you imagined it.
Yeah, well, it's really good. That, one of the good things that's developed over the last several decades, I guess, is organizations like IANS, which we've mentioned a couple of times, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which is a place where people who have had these experiences can come out, be themselves, talk to other people who have had the experiences, realize that they're not crazy, understand these things are documented. There's a database, nderf.org, that Dr. Jeffrey Long put together that's got over 4,000 experiences. I don't even know what the number is now. It's probably approaching 5,000. But
mine's one of them that's in there.
Yeah, it's actually a very common experience. And it has been for thousands, for as long as people have been around. It's become more common as we've had more abilities to save people. Resuscitation is why it kind of exploded, I guess, in the 70s, because we could bring people back who would have otherwise just, continued to cross over. But I'm glad that people like you are speaking out, and people can read books about it now and can watch documentaries. And you were telling me before we got started that Johns Hopkins is doing a project about near-death experiences.
Right. It's through their, hang on a second. Let me see if I can get the name of the journal.
Sure. Oh, actually, I think I have it here, Karen.
Oh, do you?
The Narrative Inquiry in Bioethics, a journal of qualitative research, which is affiliated with Johns Hopkins. So
Right.
I kind of stumbled all over that, but Narrative Inquiry in Bioethics, a journal of qualitative research, and that's sponsored by Johns Hopkins. So tell us about what that's going to have in it.
Well, there's going to be the narratives of 12 different near-death experiencers. I'm one of those. Chris Batts, that I mentioned to you before.
Yeah.
His is also one of those 12 that are in there. And those narratives are presented in the journal. And then in addition, what they're looking at and asking, they asked each of us questions about how things went for us in terms of our interrelationships with the medical profession. And what they're looking to do is to train the medical personnel to respond better to people who have had near-death experiences and then actually open up and share them. Because many doctors and many more doctors than nurses, I think, but many medical personnel have a tendency to just really shut off anyone, or worse yet, send them to the psych ward and get them put on psychiatric or drugs, depression drugs, things like that. And so they are really trying to bring the medical profession up to speed in terms of knowing that these experiences happen, knowing that they're not lack of oxygen to the brain that's creating a hallucination, and knowing how to help a person reintegrate back into their life better, as opposed to shuffling them away or denying what they're sharing with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great step. I'd be really curious to know what the medical profession, what they're doing with the NDE. It's at least they're acknowledging now it's something that they need to address. And I interviewed a guy named Raymond O'Brien, who had a really profound experience. He's in England, so he's working with the medical profession hand in hand as an intuitive and as an experiencer. He's actually a healer also, working with them to teach them how to deal with people who have had these experiences. Because as I said, they're very common, and a lot of people keep them to themselves. And you talked about doctors and nurses. And another thing I found interesting over the years as I've been studying this, nurses tend to believe it a lot more than doctors do. Maybe because of who they are, but also because the nurses are the ones that are around people when they have them, and they see these things, and they know that someone is speaking to someone else that's on the other side as they're getting ready to cross and things like that. And they've actually seen some evidence. I interviewed a woman who was a nurse in a hospital, and someone had a near-death experience, and it described a tennis shoe being on the ledge outside. She went and she found it. There was a tennis shoe there, so that's undeniable evidence that this person somehow was outside of the hospital, flying around.
Yeah. And another segment of society that has a difficult time is military. Because a lot of the military people, if they have a near-death experience after being severely wounded, it's particularly difficult for them to relate. Because the entire culture of the military is so, I guess you could say, so cut and dried and so not open to spiritual experience.
Right.
And, it's very tough for military personnel, and they have had some of the most negative responses from even the medical personnel around them that are military. And that's something that's being focused on more, too, is how can we help the military people and help the medical professionals deal with them better and more appropriately.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the military. I interviewed Tony Woody, who had a pretty profound experience, and he's working, I know, with the military, and Reverend Bill McDonald, who's had a couple near-death experience. I know he's working with the military. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And for us people who haven't had the experience, and you said a lot of us are kind of like, wow, I wish I could have one of those experiences. What we know is, no, you don't want to have one, but we can learn the lessons from them. We can talk to people who've had them, listen to people that had them, learn the lessons from them without actually having to have one, and understand that, it's all about love. that it's that the love from the other side, from our Creator, from our source, from God is unconditional. That we live every day as if we know we're going to have a life review. So when we have that life review, we don't have to fear it. But when we do, it's only ourselves that are looking at it. It's not someone saying you did a bad thing.
Exactly. That's perfect. And that's so true. How people who hear about near-death experiences but haven't had anything like that themselves, I think they call it in IANS the benign virus, which is basically that if you're not an experiencer, but you say go to IANS meetings or just watch videos on the internet or get to meet people who have had near-death experiences and listen to the lessons from them, that it's actually helps you and changes your internal viewpoint and your internal spirituality, like the person who had the actual experience.
Yeah, I know Dr. Ken Ring has done research on that, and I read his book. It was an excellent book about, that just that very thing, that just by studying these experiences, you can get. So when you have a near-death experience, there's good and there's bad, right? You get the lessons, but you also get the problems with the integration. We can get the lessons without having to go through the integration point. So that's what we should all strive for. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the better,
Yeah. But I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I love putting this out there because I want everybody to hear stuff like this. I want everybody to have that hope, to have that encouragement, to know who we are, to know that it almost sounds too good to be true. I think when people first hear it, they think, it can't be that good, but I think it really is.
Oh, I know it really is. And that's one of the best blessings of actually having had it, is that you no longer believe, and there's a big difference between what you believe and what you know.
Yeah.
It's a whole level difference. And the more people that we can get to understand and really intrinsically know within them, yes, this is real. This is what is true. But luckily, I think most people have kind of an internal antenna that really tunes into honesty and truth.
Yeah.
A level of deep truth. And I think that's part of why when they're exposed to other people's stories of what they experienced and get to meet them and talk to them, they just innately will feel, this is right within their own spirit. Yeah,
I think we're all looking for that affirmation. I think it's like you said, it's kind of like it's in there. We know it's in there. It's kind of like something that we've forgotten, right? It's kind of like what you said when they showed you what was going to happen, they said you're not going to remember it. So when we hear these stories, we're kind of like, it's not like we're learning, it's more like we're remembering.
Absolutely.
And I think like what you said is very right. We have this antenna that seeks that out, that resonates. So when we hear it, we're like, yeah, that's it. That's what it really is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Karen, I want to thank you very much for doing this. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to learn your story. I appreciate you sharing it so freely. You're sharing your life with us and the lessons from it. And I hope it helps somebody that's listening.
I hope so too. That's what it's all about. That's what I like to do.
Yeah. So, Karen, I know you don't have a website. You don't have a book you're promoting. Do you, if people want to reach out to you, there's a way that people can reach you?
Sure. My email address. That's as easy as anything. So.
Okay. And that's blanceth@live.com, BLANCETH.
Mm-hmm. Is that at live.com.
At live.com. Great. So, people wanted to email you. Again, it's been a real pleasure meeting you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thanks, Karen. Bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I want to make it really easy for you to reach me. So just send me a text to 31996 and simply text the word growth, GROWTH. In fact, you can right now just say, "Hey Siri, Send a message to 31996, and when Siri asks you what you want to send, just say growth. You can do the same thing with OK Google. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to Grief to Growth. Brian hopes that you find this episode helpful and will come back for future episodes. Brian's best-selling book, Grief to Growth, Planted Not Buried, is a great resource for anyone who is coping with grief or knows someone who is. If you enjoy the podcast and would like to support it, there are 3 things you can do to help. The first is to share the podcast with someone that you think it will help. The second is to go to iTunes, rate, and review the episode. The third way you can support the podcast is by becoming a patron. Head over to www.patreon.com/grief2growth. That's patreon.com/grief, the number 2, growth, and sign up to make a small monthly donation. Patrons get access to exclusive bonus content and knowledge that you are helping to spread the message of grief to growth. For more about Brian and Grief to Growth, visit www.grief2growth.com.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grief2growth.circle.so. That's grief2growth.circle.so to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.